Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Talent Finders would like to welcome founder and leader at Symposium Mastermind for successful experts, coaches, authors, podcaster, speaker, and consultant, Mike Zeller. So welcome, Mike.
We're glad to be here and honored to connect with you, Karen, and just love how you show up in the world and can't wait to dive in today.
Great. Thanks so much. So firstly, I'd like to congratulate you on all your achievements. Can you share with us how your entrepreneurial coaching journey started?
Yeah, first, in terms of achievements, a lot of achievements are preceded by a lot of failure. So it's one of my mottos since I was 22 has been fail forward faster. And as a result, you accomplish more because you have more muscle memory and more experience. Yeah, but my coaching journey started about 6 years ago. I was head of about 6 different companies or businesses that I had at the time.
Yeah.
And I had just had some people reaching out to me over and over, like, wanting 30 minutes of wisdom or buy me a cup of coffee and that type of deal. And then pretty soon half my week was taken up with people wanting support. And I wasn't getting paid for those hours, and I was investing my $500 or $1,000 an hour at a time for giving free advice that people weren't taking action on. And then I started having people that were really serious, wanting deeper in-depth support, and I started charging $1,000 a phone call is what I did at that time, and had a couple guys that had built some pretty big companies that I mentored, and they made some big leaps up and got aligned in their purpose, aligned in their family, while more deeply aligned in their business. And so that's how it began. So my first paying client was iHeart Dogs co-founder Marshall Morris, one of the largest pet brands in the U.S., online pet brands. They got 3-4 million followers and pretty massive list. So they're about a 9-figure company right now. So that's where I started.
Amazing. So as the founder of Symposium Mastermind, can you share with the audience, for those who don't know, what it is that you and your company do? If you could just give some insights.
Yeah, so with Symposium Mastermind, basically I work with what I like to call successful authors, speakers, coaches, mentors. It's for the successful expert.
Yeah.
And of course, we're all on the journey. Like, none of us are as successful as we want to be at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
But we go through 6 phases. I feel like having researched and coached a lot of different successful experts, and some that didn't quite get their boots off the ground. I was like, hey, what's the difference between this person that gets massive traction and then this person over here that just kind of languishes in? It's like they're in quicksand and they can't get themselves in stock. And I figured out there was about 6 core things. First, they get their money story right and alignment with money, and that's often the self-worth identity. Second, they find their zone of genius, which is their unique pathway for wealth, fulfillment, and impact. And I take people through 5 different personality tests, your key life experiences, your unique relationships, and then your values and passions. And you find your $10,000 an hour activity. You find what brings you life and what brings you death. And then third thing, you identify your 4% client. We know the 80-20 rule. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And the top 20% produces 80% of your results. Well, what about the top 20% of the top 20%? Can they produce 80% of 80%?
Yes.
Which would be 4% of your audience can produce 64% of your revenue if you know what they want and have something for them. And then,
no, that makes sense. So what would you then say some of your biggest lessons and learnings have been within your career?
It all starts in the mind. And here's what I mean. Right now you can't see it if you're just listening in, but I'm holding a little coffee mug. Yeah. And this coffee mug is about 10 ounces of liquid. If I pour 5 gallons of water into that coffee mug, it's still only going to hold 10 ounces of water.
Yeah.
And oftentimes our money mindset or our identity is like that container. If it's small, then it doesn't matter how much opportunity, how much strategy, how many tools are thrown your way, it's just going to go right over.
Yes.
If I shift the container, if I expand the container and make it a 5-gallon bucket, but doesn't mean there's 5 gallons of water in there. Doesn't mean the bucket's full, but the capacity to hold it is massive.
Yes.
And so I had a client, one of the handful of clients, I can count the clients on my hand that have been really pissed at me in my career. And one of them was in 2019. And I had this girl that I just poured my heart and soul into, and she loved working with me at the beginning. The first like 90 days were exceptional. But then about the 4th, 5th month, I started getting frustrated and started asking, why isn't this working? And frankly, she wasn't doing all the strategies and tools I'd advised her. But the main thing is her identity hadn't shifted yet. And I hadn't emphasized that enough. And ultimately she ended up getting super pissed off and asking for a refund for part of what she went through. She didn't ask for a total refund, but a partial refund. And I was like, why did this girl not get the results and these guys over here did? When I walked her through the exact same path that I knew would work for her, she didn't really implement it, but what was the subconscious belief barriers holding her back? And it was her identity had not shifted of her possibility. So now I lead with that. Now I work on the money story right away because most of us tend to have some subconscious money blocks.
Yeah, for sure. So your company has done exceptionally well with turnovers of $300 million in sales, which is obviously incredible. So the world has rapidly changed over the past several years with a massive oversaturation within the coaching and author and podcasting world. So what would you say has separated you from others within your industry? And can you give us any examples?
Yeah, good question. So a lot of those sales, just for full disclosure, a lot of those sales were in, like I had for example, a car dealership that we did, 30 million a year in sales, 25, 30 million a year in sales during a certain time period. So, which I sold that in 2017. I sold my equity in it back then. But what I've found in this land of upheaval that we find ourselves in, and actually I had my best income, my net income to myself last year. That was my best year yet, and this year probably will be at least triple that. And what I've found is, yes, the buyers or the market has shifted radically, but we got to go on a hunt for where am I needed?
Yes, for sure. You have to find that gap, right?
Yeah, and so you gotta search a little bit more differently, and you gotta be open. Like right now, one of the things I'm looking at pretty seriously is opening up COVID testing centers. While my coaching business is doing well, and that's growing, and that alone should triple this year. But I'm looking deep on this COVID testing center because there's a massive need for more COVID testing.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially I got access to 15-minute COVID test. So where can you find people are always buying in some season? Now they may not buy your product or service that you were offering last year. They find out what they need this year. This is where you get real customer intimacy. Connected, and how can you help them right now? You might have to strip away the old and create room for new.
Absolutely. So what would you say some of your biggest career highlights have been? I mean, I'm sure you've got a multitude, but like what stands out for you the most?
I think I get very excited when I see people's identities change forever.
Yeah.
So I think of this one couple that I work with. They were fitness coaches, or they are fitness coaches, and in 2018, like the wife joined my mastermind in April. The husband joined it in July. They were just dating at that point. They were boyfriend, girlfriend. She had gone through a divorce and all these things, and she was making a good living, like $250K, and he was making about $100K. And but she had been stuck at that plateau for like 4 years. Well, I took her through the wheel, the money story, zone of genius, 4% client. The fourth one is find your irresistible offer for that 4% client. Fifth is build and develop an A-player team. Sixth is establish expert authority. And by the end of that year, well, really, she started in April and he started in July. By really 6 months later, they had done $900,000.
Wow, that's amazing.
And at a very high profit margin. And it forever changed their life, and they're never going back.
Yeah, no, that's amazing.
Yeah, and it was because they went down what I call the aligned and prosperous expert pathway. When your identity changes, it's kind of like riding a bike. Once you learn how to ride a bike, you don't forget.
Yeah, exactly. Or driving a car.
Yeah, it's with you for life. So
yeah,
same thing when you break through. It's like if you're early stage and you have your first $5,000 a month, that now that can become, it doesn't automatically become your new floor, but your old ceiling in many cases can become your new floor. So
yes.
I remember first year I made $100,000. I was like, whoa. And then I never went down below that.
Yeah.
And then you keep inching up 250, 500, a million, whatever.
Yeah.
And your identity pulls you one way or another.
So that leads me to social media, which has obviously changed our worlds and been a great tool to assist businesses, but it also has a negative side to it. So how do you believe that these platforms should be used more responsibly to improve the current narrative? Because there's just so much noise and, so much. So, what's your opinion on that?
Great question. Social media, it can be distracting. It can be all-consuming. It can also create anxiety and negative emotions many times. And I think it's something to be managed. If I look at how we get into comparisonitis, because people see,
which creates FOMO.
Yep. And then like my wife battles with mental health sometimes. She's a 2-time suicide survivor. So I didn't cause that. I always like to put that disclaimer. That was before me, but there's still some traumas and healing and all that are still happening, like for us all.
Yeah.
And sometimes she'll see things on Instagram, and sometimes I can too, and see, this person's doing that. Why am I not there?
Yeah.
And so I think we have to monitor it and have a grain of salt of like, hey, this is people's best. It's like their Sunday best. They're putting on their best clothes, their best persona, myself included. Sometimes, sometimes I share the dirt, but not always. And then watching our time, like I like to, I start my day off not looking at my phone the first thing. Like I go into my gratitudes, I go into some of my reading, I get a little workout, I can do my meditation, I do my affirmations, I read even my Bible, right? Like I'm doing certain things to feed my soul with good nutrition.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before I get the popcorn.
Welcome back. Sorry about yesterday. We had some technical issues. So welcome back, Mike. Thanks for coming back. I wanted to obviously touch on leadership, or the lack of leadership, as a massive topic. So what would you say is unique about your leadership style, and what do you believe needs to change from an entrepreneurial as well as global perspective to improve the current narrative, and what has worked for you?
Hey, Karen. So when I think of my leadership style and what is needed to change the global narrative, I would say it's an old story around leadership, in the sense of throughout history, leaders or people who have clamored for power have often clamored for power to use it for their own gain instead of using it to serve. And you look throughout history, there's of course outliers, and there's of course people who have used power most effectively because of a deep vow of service. You think of Gandhi, you think of Martin Luther King Jr., Abraham Lincoln, others throughout history that really they were great leaders because they put people before themselves and before their own ego. And so that hasn't really changed, in the sense of Obviously, with certain presidents, we'll say.
Yes.
uh,
No
no,
names mentioned.
yeah, no names needed. You could tell that it was about them. And leadership at its highest regard is serving. And there's this old identity that I think it was Aristotle said, the greatest leaders should be what he called philosopher kings.
Yeah.
Philosopher kings were so devoted to serving and thinking about what was best for their society. They were not consumed with wanting it for power. In fact, they were often reluctant. He thought the very best leaders would be reluctant, but would do it out of duty and service. So I think that's still true. And you look at things like toxic masculinity, you think of, just other elements of ego, insecurity that trumps, that comes into play. When you haven't done the inner work to make sure you're using your platform to serve and edify and lift up others, man, you do people a disservice, and you can create carnage. But when you do, beautiful things happen. Like I just hosted an epic mastermind retreat with about 15 other entrepreneurs in Austin, Texas, and so it's 3 days of power packed sessions and just edification and love and support. And at the end of the weekend, some of the people on my team and some of the other leaders said that was the best mastermind that I'd ever been to. And it was because I had shifted, I'd made the spotlight on the people attending,
yes,
instead of on me.
which is so important.
Yeah. So I think when you look at it, it's like, how do I put the spotlight on others and help them rise up? As in the presence of great leaders, people become more.
Yes.
Become more of who they think they are and they know themselves capable of. And then the other piece is like D Hawk, the founder of Visa. He wrote about how the very best leaders in the world spent more than 50% of their time leading themselves.
Yes.
So I think that's really important. It's like doing that inner work, knowing the direction you need to go, knowing how you want to show up. And if you do that, man, great things can truly happen.
Absolutely. So how do you see the speaking industry moving forward? And do you think that this has eliminated much of the rubbish in the industry that has been produced over the past few years?
Good question. I see the speaking industry shifting a lot. I think in this world, obviously there's more Zooms, more speaking at virtual events. I do think that there is a ton of pent up demand for live events. I was talking to a guy earlier this week, and he said, and he's very knowledgeable in the event space.
Yes.
Because he hosts large events, and like 4,000, 5,000 people. And he said, I asked him about, hey, what's going to happen with live events? And he's like, you know what? The event, and he owns like conventions.com or something like that. And he said, some of the places that he's talked to are booked up through 2023.
Wow.
They're just anticipating the live demand to come back in a surge. And I felt it when I just hosted my last mastermind retreat. Like yes. Speakers would come on Friday morning and stay till Friday night and then ask to come and hang out the next day. They're like, Mike, I love this. Can we come back tomorrow and just hang out? People were longing for community and to belong and
also for human connection.
Yeah.
So that leads me to the last two questions. What are the 3 key pieces of advice you would give to other entrepreneurs who want to pursue similar careers? And what legacy would you like to leave, or how would you like to be remembered? Because some people don't like the word legacy. So how would you like to be remembered?
The first piece of advice for entrepreneurs in their careers, I encourage people, know thyself. Socrates said the beginning of all wisdom is to know thyself. And I don't think most of us do enough reflection time, myself included. I could do more.
Yes.
But when we get down and get our hands dirty on understanding, seeking to understand ourselves, to know ourselves, man, beautiful, beautiful things unfold. And if you look at people that accomplish very successful things, like last night, I'm hosting another e-commerce mastermind, and the guys that I'm hanging out with last night, they're two really big players in the industry. And you could tell they have a lot of self-awareness about their vision, their direction, who they are. Like they've mapped out, one of them, my buddy Colin Wayne, has mapped out his whole vision for 2021.
Yes.
He spelled it out. It's like where he's going and what he's building. And so people who accomplish extraordinary things, they put themselves in extraordinarily right positions.
Yes. It's all about being strategic too, right?
Yeah. So that's the first piece. If you put yourself in extraordinarily right positions, man, you're going to do really, really well. But it takes hard work to get to know that, in the sense of, and that's why I honestly created a zone of genius process, which takes you through 5 different personality tests. So it helps you find the 4 key areas: your unique abilities, your key life experiences, where you do an inventory of all the significant life experiences that may seem insignificant to you, but upon reflection, they're actually pretty unique. And the third piece, you identify your unique relationships. When you have clarity on your unique relationships, like I had a preponderance of authors and e-commerce guys. When I had that clarity, I was like, whoa, all right. So there's something there. Like it's not normal for someone to have 20 best-selling authors as friends. And then you go through your values and passions. And that is almost like a final filter. And when you have all 4 of those sorted and all the clues gathered, you will have the greatest accumulation of clues about who you are and what on earth you're meant to do that you will have ever had. And then you start filtering and organizing and sifting, and then you'll land on your zone of genius, or much closer to it. And then along that pathway, then you get to step into your unique pathway to wealth, fulfillment, and impact. And that's why I wrote a book about it. It's still in editing, but it's coming out very soon.
Oh, great.
Called Find Your Genius. And then I've got a course on that right now, zoneofgeniuscourse.com. So I'm loving seeing people just shift in powerful ways going through it.
That's amazing. So what legacy would you like to leave, or how would you like to be remembered?
I think I've got a couple pillars. I would add a couple pillars. One, I want to be a great, husband, family man, legacy in my own home, be the sort of person I am publicly, privately as well. But then I think of, I want to build some epic businesses that have a social impact. For example, I'm building a sustainable wine company, and I feel like, in the US alone, there's 3.9 billion bottles of wine thrown in landfills every single year.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of freaking wine bottles. So how do we shift some of that? And how do I create a much deeper and powerful and beautiful impact? Sustainability is a piece that I want to leave a legacy, but also the thousands of entrepreneurs I want to impact and serve and help them step into their unique genius and unique pathway. Like, my end vision for this decade of my life is to establish myself as America's top entrepreneur mentor. I'm not there yet, but I'm going to get there.
Yes, of course. That's obviously, and it's always like a vision, to expand and be greater than your purpose, for sure. So thanks so much for joining us today. If people would like to get in contact with you, what are the best platforms to do so?
Great question. MikeZeller.com. And then Michael R. Zeller on Instagram, and Michael Zeller on Facebook, Clubhouse, all those platforms. And then if you guys are interested in finding your unique pathway and purpose, go ahead and check out my zoneofgeniuscourse.com. And that's me, and would love to hear from you guys and love to know how I can support.
Great. Well, thanks so much. And hopefully we can have you back in the future to see where you are in your journey.
I'd love to. Always great connecting, Karen.
Great. Thanks so much, Mike.